Count the children in this photograph. A father and mother seated. Around them their children. 1, 2, 3, and then on the far right, standing slightly apart from the others, a fourth. A girl, perhaps 13 or 14 years old, dark hair, light eyes, hands clasped in front of her. She looks directly at the camera. Now look at the family Bible that was found with this photograph. It lists 3 children. Not 4. 3. The girl on the far right of this photograph is named Eleanor Weston. She was 14 years old when this image was taken in the spring of 1907 in the parlor of her family's home in Danvers, Massachusetts. The next morning, 2 men arrived at the house with a carriage. Eleanor's father met them at the door. He handed them a suitcase. He handed them a signed commitment order, and then he handed them his daughter. Eleanor was taken to the Medfield State Hospital for the Insane, a sprawling brick institution 43 miles south of her home. She was not insane, she was deaf. She had been deaf since birth. In 1907, that was enough. The family told their neighbors Eleanor had died of scarlet fever. They held a service at their church. They accepted condolences. They buried an empty coffin. Eleanor didn't know any of this. Eleanor was alive. She was standing in a dormitory with 40 strangers, holding a suitcase her mother had packed, waiting for someone to explain why she was there. No one ever did. Because the only people who could explain it, her family, had decided she no longer existed. I need to tell you something before we go further. When I researched this story, I found a detail that I haven't been able to stop thinking about for weeks. It's in a nurse's notebook, just one line, written in pencil, about something Eleanor did every single Sunday for over 50 years. When you hear it, you won't forget it either. But first, you need to understand who the Westons were and why a father would erase his own child. Harold Weston was not a cruel man by the standards of his era. He was something arguably worse. He was an ambitious one. Born in 1868 to a farming family outside Danvers, Harold had clawed his way into respectability through a combination of hard work and calculated social climbing. By 1900, he owned a dry goods store, served on the town council, and had married Adelaide Porter, the daughter of a family with roots in Danvers going back to the Revolution. The Westons had 3 healthy children. Then, in 1893, Eleanor was born. She was perfect, 10 fingers, 10 toes, strong lungs, bright eyes. She was also completely deaf. In 1893, deafness was not merely a medical condition. It was a moral judgment. Popular science of the era linked deafness to defective heredity, the idea that certain families carried tainted blood that produced damaged offspring. A deaf child wasn't just a challenge. A deaf child was evidence of biological failure. For a man who had spent his life building a reputation of strength and respectability, Eleanor was a problem. For 14 years, Harold Weston managed the problem by hiding it. Eleanor was kept home from school. She was not brought to church. She was not introduced to visitors. When neighbors asked about the eldest Weston girl, Adelaide would say she was delicate, a Victorian euphemism that covered everything from tuberculosis to inconvenience. Eleanor existed in the margins of her own family. She could see her siblings playing in the yard from her bedroom window. She could watch her father greet guests at the front door, guests who never knew she was upstairs. She lived in a house full of people and grew up completely alone. But she had her mother. Adelaide loved Eleanor in the only way the era allowed, quietly, privately, in stolen moments when Harold was at the store. She learned basic signs. She brushed Eleanor's hair every night. She packed her lunches even though Eleanor never went to school. It wasn't enough, but it was everything Adelaide could give. In January 1907, Harold Weston was nominated for a seat in the Massachusetts state legislature. It was everything he had worked for: respectability, power, legacy. There was just one problem. His political opponents had heard rumors about a hidden child. They were asking questions. They were threatening to make the matter public. Harold had a choice: acknowledge Alina and risk the whisper campaign that would follow, the questions about defective blood, about what else the Westons might be hiding, or remove the problem permanently. He chose to remove it. He chose to remove her. Harold Weston decided his political career was worth more than his daughter. He made that decision in January. By March, Alina would be gone. And by April, as far as the town of Danvers knew, Alina Weston would be dead. Harold Weston believed he had solved the problem. He believed Alina would be forgotten within a year. He believed he had won. He was wrong, because Adelaide had done something the night before Alina was taken, something Harold never discovered, something that wouldn't be found for 97 years. The photograph was taken on March 14, 1907, one day before Alina's commitment. Harold had arranged for a traveling photographer to visit the home. This was not unusual. Families of Harold's status often commissioned formal portraits. What was unusual was Harold's insistence that all 4 children be in the photograph. Why would a man who was about to erase his daughter include her in a family portrait? The answer is chilling in its practicality. Harold needed proof for the state legislature vetting committee that his family was complete and healthy. The photograph was not a sentimental gesture. It was a campaign document. Alina was included not because Harold loved her, but because he needed to show she existed before he could convincingly claim she had died. The photograph was taken at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Look at it again now, knowing what you know. See Alina's position on the far right, separated from her siblings by nearly a foot of empty space. See her father's body, turned slightly away from her, as if she's already not quite part of the family. See her clasped hands holding herself because no one else is holding her. And see her mother. Adelaide is seated in the center as convention demanded. Her face is composed, but her left hand, look at her left hand, is reaching toward Alina's side of the frame, not quite touching, not quite there, as if she wanted to reach for her daughter but was told not to. Or as if she knew this was the last time they would be in the same room. That night, March 14, 1907, Adelaide Weston did something extraordinary. After Harold fell asleep, she went to Alina's bedroom. She sat on the edge of the bed. She took her daughter's hands, and in the simple signs they had developed together over 14 years, she told Alina something. We know this because of what was found inside Alina's suitcase 97 years later. A piece of paper, folded 8 times, hidden inside the lining of the case where no one would find it. On it in Adelaide's handwriting were 7 words. 7 words that Adelaide must have written knowing Alina would not be able to hear them spoken. 7 words pressed into her daughter's hands on the last night they would ever share. 7 words that Alina carried for 62 years. The note read, "I will come for you, wait for me." Adelaide had made her daughter a promise she would spend the rest of her life trying to keep. Imagine being 14 years old. Imagine being deaf in a world that considers your silence a disease. Imagine your father has decided you're an inconvenience. Imagine you don't fully understand what's happening, only that tomorrow strangers are coming. And imagine your mother sits on your bed in the dark, takes your hands, and gives you 7 words to hold on to. "I will come for you, wait for me." Alina folded the note 8 times. She hid it inside her suitcase. She carried it into an institution she would not leave for 62 years. And she waited. God help her, she waited. Everything I've told you so far, the commitment, the fake funeral, the photograph, the note, none of it compares to what Adelaide did next. And none of it compares to what Harold did to stop her. Alina was committed to Medfield State Hospital on March 15, 1907. She was listed as patient number 4471. Her diagnosis: congenital deaf mutism with suspected feeble-mindedness. She was not feeble-minded. She was 14 and terrified, and could not hear the doctors who examined her, or the nurses who shouted instructions she couldn't follow, or the other patients who screamed through the night in the ward next to hers. She could not hear anything, but she could read. Adelaide had taught Alina to read secretly in the evenings when Harold was at the store. It was their private rebellion. Mother and daughter hunched over books by lamplight, building a bridge of words across the silence between them. And it was this skill, reading, that made what happened next so unbearably cruel. 3 weeks after Alina was committed, Adelaide began writing letters. She wrote to Alina at Medfield, addressing them to patient Alina Weston, Ward 7. She told Alina she loved her. She told Alina she was trying to bring her home. She told Alina to be brave, to be patient, to wait. "I will come for you," she wrote, echoing the note she had pressed into Alina's hands. "Wait for me." She wrote one letter every month. April 1907, May 1907, June, July, August, September. Alina never received a single one. Harold intercepted them. Every month, Harold walked to the mailbox before Adelaide woke up. He took the outgoing letters. He burned them in the stove at his dry goods store, the same stove where he burned old receipts and outdated inventory lists. He burned his wife's letters to their daughter alongside garbage. He did this with the efficiency of a man, disposing of a minor inconvenience. Think about that for a moment. Think about what that requires of a person. Adelaide would sit at the kitchen table after supper. She would take a sheet of paper from the drawer. She would pick up her pen, and she would write to her daughter carefully, lovingly, filling each page with the words she could no longer sign into Alina's hands. Harold watched her do this. He watched her seal the envelope. He watched her write the address. He watched her walk to the mailbox the next morning with something close to hope on her face, the hope that this time Alina might write back, that this time the silence might break. And then he walked to that same mailbox before dawn, took the letter and burned it. He did not do this once. He did not do this for a month or a year. Adelaide wrote 347 letters to her daughter over the next 31 years. 347 letters. Harold burned every single one. Adelaide died in 1938 believing Alina had forgotten her, believing her daughter had received letter after letter and chosen not to respond, believing that the girl she had taught to read, the girl she had promised to rescue, had given up on her. She died believing she had failed. She hadn't failed. She had been sabotaged by the man who slept beside her every night for 31 years, the man who watched her write those letters at the kitchen table, who saw the hope in her face as she walked to the mailbox, who knew every single time that the letter would never arrive. He watched her hope, and he burned it. 347 letters. 31 years. Not one word reached Alina. Not one. But what was happening to Alina during those 31 years? What was happening to the girl who was waiting, who had been told to wait, for a mother who never came? What I found in a nurse's notebook answers that question. And I need to warn you, it's the part of this story I can't stop thinking about. Medfield State Hospital in 1907 was not a place of healing. It was a warehouse for people society did not want to see. The hospital held over 1,200 patients. Most were not mentally ill. They were epileptic, disabled, elderly, impoverished, or simply inconvenient. They were wives whose husbands wanted younger women. They were daughters whose fathers wanted political careers. They were human beings redefined as problems and filed away. Alina was placed in Ward 7, the ward for quiet incurables, patients who were not violent, patients who did not scream or fight or try to escape, patients who simply sat and waited for lives that had been stolen from them. Alina sat, and she waited. The days at Medfield followed a routine so rigid it could crush the soul out of a person. Wake at 6, breakfast at 6:30, the same oatmeal, the same tin cups, the same long tables where patients sat shoulder to shoulder in silence. Work detail from 8 until noon, laundry, mostly, or kitchen duty or sewing. Alina was assigned to the sewing room, where her hands could be useful even if her ears could not. Lunch, more work, supper at 5, lights out at 8. 7 days a week, 52 weeks a year, for 62 years. The outside world changed around her. 2 world wars came and went. The Great Depression emptied pockets and filled institutions. Television was invented. Men walked on the moon. The civil rights movement transformed American society. None of it reached Ward 7. Alina's world was the same 4 walls, the same barred windows, the same faces, some of them there for decades just like her. She watched other patients come and go. Some were released to families who remembered them. Some were transferred to other facilities when Medfield became too crowded. Some were carried out under white sheets, their beds filled by the next morning with someone new. Alina stayed. She had one possession through all those years, the suitcase her mother had packed in 1907. Inside it, hidden in the lining, the note, 7 words in her mother's handwriting. "I will come for you, wait for me." Alina read that note every night for 62 years. The paper grew soft from the oils of her fingers. The ink grew faint, the blue-black letters fading to a ghostly gray. The folds where she had creased it 8 times began to tear, the fibers separating along lines she had traced so many times they had worn thin as tissue. But she could still read it. She would always be able to read it. She had memorized every curve of her mother's handwriting, every loop and line. Even if the ink disappeared completely, she would still see those words. They were carved into her memory the way her mother's face was carved into her heart. And every Sunday, every single Sunday, Alina did something that broke the hearts of everyone who witnessed it. A nurse named Dorothy Hargrove worked at Medfield from 1951 to 1967. She kept personal notebooks, observations about patients she found remarkable. Her family donated the notebooks to the Massachusetts State Archives in 2003. On page 43 of her 1952 notebook, Dorothy wrote one line about patient 4471. One line. Patient 4471 dresses in her best clothes every Sunday morning, sits by the front window of the ward and watches the road. When asked why, she writes on her slate, "And why Mother is coming today." She has done this every Sunday since before anyone here can remember. No one has ever come. Every Sunday. Her best clothes. The front window. Watching the road. My mother is coming today. Think about what that means. Think about the scale of it. Alina arrived at Medfield in 1907. Dorothy Hargrove wrote those words in 1952. That means Alina had already been dressing in her best clothes and sitting by the window every Sunday for 45 years when a nurse finally thought to write it down. 45 years of Sundays, over 2,300 Sundays, 2,300 mornings of waking up with hope, 2,300 times smoothing her best dress and fixing her hair and walking to the window and sitting down and watching the road that stretched away from the hospital toward a world that had forgotten her. 2,300 times believing that today, her mother would appear on that road. Today the carriage would come. Today the door would open and her mother would walk in and take her hands and sign the words she had been waiting to see. I came for you just like I promised. It never happened. She had been waiting 45 years when Dorothy wrote those words. She would wait 17 more. Alina Weston waited by that window for 62 years. Every Sunday, every single Sunday in her best clothes, watching the road. Her mother never came. Not because Adelaide didn't try, because Harold made sure she couldn't. If Alina's story is breaking your heart the way it broke mine, please take a moment to subscribe. Every video on this channel uncovers a story hidden inside an old photograph. A story about someone who was forgotten, erased, or silenced. And every video is my attempt to make sure they're finally heard. The story isn't over. Stay with me. What comes next changes everything. Adelaide Weston died on November 3, 1938. She was 68 years old. She died at home, in the bedroom she had shared with Harold for 40 years. Her other 3 children were at her bedside. Harold was downstairs. In her final hours, Adelaide asked for Alina. Her children didn't understand. They had grown up believing Alina died of scarlet fever in 1907. They had attended the funeral. They had watched the coffin lowered into the ground. Their sister had been dead for over 30 years, or so they believed. "Alina is gone, Mother," her son William said gently. "She's been gone a long time." Adelaide closed her eyes. Her breathing was shallow. Her hands trembled on the quilt her own mother had sewn decades ago. "I never stopped writing," she whispered. "I wrote every month. She never wrote back. I think she hates me." Her children exchanged confused glances. They didn't know about the letters. They didn't know about the mailbox. They didn't know that their father was downstairs in the parlor, listening to his wife's final words, knowing that every one of them was a consequence of what he had done. Adelaide died believing her daughter hated her. She died 43 miles from a woman who dressed in her best clothes every Sunday and watched the road, waiting for her mother to come. At the same moment Adelaide was dying in Danvers, Alina was sitting in Ward 7 at Medfield State Hospital. It was a Thursday, not a Sunday. Alina was not in her best clothes. She was not watching the road. But the note was in her pocket. It was always in her pocket. "I will come for you. Wait for me." She didn't know her mother was dying. She didn't know her mother had written 347 letters. She didn't know that every word of love Adelaide had tried to send had been turned to ash in her father's stove. All Alina knew was what she had known for 31 years. Her mother had promised to come. Her mother hadn't come, but maybe next Sunday would be different. It wasn't. It was never different. And now it never could be. Adelaide never knew that her letters were intercepted. Alina never knew that her mother tried. Each woman spent decades believing the other had given up. Adelaide believed Alina had forgotten her. Alina believed Adelaide had abandoned her. Neither was true. Both died believing a lie that one man had constructed and maintained for 31 years. A lie built from burned letters and a locked mailbox, and the small, daily cruelty of a man who decided his reputation was worth more than his family. Harold Weston did not kill his wife or his daughter. He did something worse. He killed the knowledge that they loved each other. And that raises a question that haunted me through every hour of this research. Did Alina die in that institution? Did she die never knowing her mother tried? Or did the truth, somehow, impossibly, reach her before the end? In 2004, a woman named Claire Weston Marshall was cleaning out her late father's home in Danvers, Massachusetts. Her father, William Weston Jr., Harold's grandson, had died at 91. He had been a quiet man who rarely spoke about the family history. When Claire would ask about the old days, about the Westons who came before, her father would change the subject. He'd pour himself another cup of coffee and talk about the weather or the Red Sox or anything at all except the people in the photographs that lined the hallway of his home. Claire had always assumed there was nothing to tell. Some families just aren't storytellers, she thought. Some families just move forward and don't look back. She was wrong. Some families don't look back because they're afraid of what they'll see. In the attic, behind a stack of water-damaged boxes and beneath a wool blanket that smelled of mothballs and decades, She found a trunk she had never seen before. It was heavy. It was locked. The key was in her father's desk drawer, a small brass key on a ring with no label, a key she had found weeks earlier and almost thrown away. Inside the trunk were Harold Weston's personal papers, business records from the dry goods store, political correspondence from his years in the legislature, old photographs with names she didn't recognize written on the backs in faded pencil. And at the bottom, in a metal lockbox, something that made Claire's hands go cold. Letters, hundreds of them, all in the same handwriting, a woman's handwriting, careful and deliberate and achingly neat, all addressed to patient Eldest Weston, Ward 7, Medfield State Hospital. All unopened, all unsent. Claire stared at the letters for a long time. She counted them. She counted them again. 347. They were not the originals. Adelaide had taken those to the mailbox every month, and Harold had burned them. These were something else entirely. These were the drafts. Adelaide had written rough drafts of her letters before copying them in neat handwriting for the final versions. She kept the drafts in a drawer in the kitchen, the drawer where she kept her stationery, her stamps, her pens. When she died in 1938, Harold, not realizing what they were, or perhaps not caring enough to check, had simply locked them away with his other papers. He had locked away the evidence of his own cruelty, and he had preserved it forever. The drafts had survived. 347 drafts. 31 years of a mother's love, written in pencil, smudged and tear-stained and desperate. Some of the pages were warped where tears had fallen and dried. Some had words crossed out and rewritten, Adelaide searching for the right way to tell her daughter she was coming. She was trying. She hadn't given up. The first letter was dated April 1907. It began, "My dearest Eldest, I am writing to tell you that I have not forgotten you. I will never forget you. I am trying to bring you home." The last letter was dated February 1938, 9 months before Adelaide died. It began, "My darling girl, I am old now and I am tired, but I am still trying. I will never stop trying. Wait for me." 31 years, the same promise, the same words, the same desperate love poured onto page after page that never reached the hands they were meant for. Claire read the first letter, then the second, then the 10th. By the 50th, she was on the phone to the Massachusetts State Archives. "I think my great aunt is alive," she said. Her voice was shaking. "I think she's been alive this entire time. I think my family lied." She was almost right. Eldest Weston, patient 4471, had died at Medfield State Hospital on September 8, 1969. She was 76 years old. She had spent 62 years inside those walls. She had been buried in the hospital's cemetery, plot 1187, marked only with a small metal plate stamped with her patient number. No name, no dates, no flowers, no family. Just a number in a field of numbers. Claire had missed Eldest by 35 years. She sat in her father's attic, surrounded by the letters her great-grandmother had written and her great-grandfather had burned, and she wept for a woman she had never known existed. A woman who had waited her entire life for someone to come. A woman whose family had erased her so completely that 3 generations passed without anyone knowing she had ever been born. 35 years too late. But not too late to set the record straight. Harold Weston won his seat in the state legislature in 1907. He served 3 terms. He was known as a man of integrity and family values. He shook hands at church suppers. He gave speeches about the importance of strong families and moral character. He stood at podiums and spoke with conviction about protecting the vulnerable. He did all of this knowing his eldest daughter was sitting in a hospital ward 43 miles away, watching the road every Sunday, waiting for someone who would never come. He died in 1942, 4 years after Adelaide. He was 74. His obituary described him as a devoted husband and father of 3 children. 3 children. Even in death, he erased her. His political career, the career that was worth more than his daughter's freedom, lasted 12 years. He lost his seat in 1919, defeated by a younger candidate who campaigned on reform and progress. Harold returned to his dry goods store, but the business had suffered in his absence. Competition from larger retailers ate away at his customers. By 1930, the store was barely solvent. By 1935, it was gone. The reputation he had sacrificed Alina to protect did not survive. The legacy he had burned 347 letters to preserve amounted to nothing. He is not remembered by history. He is not remembered by Danvers. He is not even remembered by most of his own descendants. Alina is remembered. The difference is that someone decided Alina was worth remembering. When Claire contacted Medfield, now closed, its records transferred to the state archives, she requested Alina's personal belongings. The archivist was apologetic. Most patients' possessions had been discarded when the hospital closed in 2003. Clothing, books, personal items, decades of accumulated lives, boxed up and thrown away as if they had never mattered. But there was one item that had been preserved. One item that someone, a nurse, an orderly, a person whose name is lost to the record, had thought was worth saving. A suitcase. The same suitcase Adelaide had packed on March 14, 1907. It was battered. The leather was cracked and dry. The clasps were rusted. The handle had been repaired with twine at some point, Alina's work probably, mending the only thing she had left of home. Claire opened it carefully. Inside, the lining had been pulled away from the frame, deliberately, neatly, by hands that knew exactly where to look. And inside the lining, folded 8 times, was a piece of paper so fragile it nearly disintegrated at the touch. But the words were still legible. "I will come for you, wait for me." 62 years. Alina had carried those words for 62 years. The paper was almost translucent. The ink had faded to the faintest whisper of gray. The creases where Alina had folded and unfolded it thousands of times every night for 62 years had worn the fibers down to almost nothing. But it had survived, just barely, just enough. Like Alina herself. She had never stopped believing. She had never stopped waiting. In the summer of 2005, Claire Weston Marshall drove to the Medfield State Hospital Cemetery. The hospital had closed 2 years earlier. The building stood empty, brick and stone and broken windows, corridors where 1,000 forgotten people had lived and died and been reduced to numbers on metal plates in the ground. The cemetery was behind the main complex, on a gentle slope overlooking a meadow. It was overgrown. The grass was knee-high. Wildflowers grew between the markers. Claire walked through the rows. Plot after plot, each one marked with nothing but a small metal plate pressed into the earth. Numbers, just numbers. No names, no dates of birth, no beloved daughter or cherished mother or any of the words that families carve into stone to say this person mattered, this person was loved, this person was here. She found plot 1187, a metal plate in the grass, the number 4471. She knelt beside it. She pressed her hand against the earth. The ground was warm from the afternoon sun. Somewhere in the meadow below, birds were singing, the kind of bird song Alina had never heard. And Claire spoke to an aunt she had never met, an aunt who had been erased from her family's history before Claire was born. "I'm sorry," she said. "I'm sorry no one came." She stayed for over an hour. She didn't move. She just knelt there with her hand on the earth, talking to a woman 62 years gone, telling her everything, about Adelaide's letters, about Harold's betrayal, about the family that had grown and thrived and never known she existed. "Your mother tried," Claire whispered. "Every month, for 31 years, she never stopped. She never gave up on you. She loved you until the last breath she took. You need to know that. Wherever you are, you need to know." 3 months later, A headstone was placed on the grave. It reads, Eleanor Ruth Wston, 1893–1969. Beloved daughter of Adelaide. She waited, she was not forgotten. Beneath those words, Claire had the stonemason carve 7 more. I will come for you, wait for me. 98 years after Adelaide wrote those words on a piece of paper and pressed them into her daughter's hands on the last night they would ever share, they finally reached Eleanor's side. The promise was kept. Not by Adelaide. Adelaide never got the chance. But by a great-grandniece who found 347 letters in an attic and refused to let the story end the way Harold had intended. Claire donated Adelaide's 347 letter drafts to the Massachusetts Historical Society. They are now part of the permanent collection, cataloged under Weston Marshall Family Papers. Researchers and students can read them. They can hold the same pages Adelaide held. They can see the tear stains and the crossed-out words and the desperate, unshakable love of a mother writing into a void, hopping against hope that her words would reach her daughter. The family photograph, the one showing 4 children, not 3, hangs in Claire's home in Danvers. Beside it hangs a copy of the note from the suitcase lining, framed in glass. 7 words in Adelaide's handwriting, preserved behind museum-quality glass so they will never fade again. Claire has 2 daughters. They know Eleanor's name. They know Adelaide's story. They know what Harold did. They know that silence can be a weapon and that secrets can be a prison and that the only antidote to erasure is memory. On Sundays, Claire's youngest daughter, who is 14, the same age Eleanor was when she was taken, sometimes looks out the front window of their house. She watches the road that runs past the old Weston property, the same road Eleanor watched from 43 miles away for 62 years. I'm watching for Eleanor, she says. She's not joking. The Westons don't forget anymore. Look at the photograph one last time. See Eleanor on the far right standing apart, hands clasped, looking directly at the camera. See what you couldn't see before. She's not posing. She's saying goodbye. She doesn't know it yet, but this is the last photograph that will ever be taken of her. The last proof that she was part of this family. The last time she will stand in the same room as her mother. See Adelaide's hand reaching toward Eleanor, not quite touching. See it now for what it is, not a gesture of distance, a gesture of desperation, a mother reaching for a daughter she's about to lose. And see Harold. See his body turned away. See the angle of his shoulders already pointed toward the door, toward the future, toward the life he's chosen to live without his eldest child. This photograph was taken as a political prop, a campaign document, a piece of evidence to be filed and forgotten. It became the only proof that Eleanor Weston ever existed. Harold took everything else. He couldn't take this. In 2006, Claire had the original photograph digitally restored and enhanced. During the enhancement process, the technician noticed something in the window behind the family, a reflection that shouldn't have been there. The window shows the exterior of the house, the front walk, the road beyond. And on the road, barely visible, more impression than image, a figure. A small figure, standing, looking toward the house. The photograph was taken indoors. The family was assembled in the parlor. There was no one outside at the time of the exposure. The photographer's notes confirm this. The figure's size is consistent with a young girl, 14 years old perhaps. The technician asked Claire, "Is there supposed to be someone standing on the road?" Claire looked at the image for a long time. Her eyes moved from Eleanor in the photograph to the figure on the road and back again. She didn't speak for nearly a minute. "Yes," she said quietly. "She's still watching, she's still waiting." Experts have offered explanations: a photographic artifact, a reflection, a defect in the glass plate. All are plausible. None explain why the figure appears to be looking toward the window of Ward 7. Alina Weston waited 62 years for her mother to come. Her mother tried every month for 31 years. Neither of them ever stopped. They just never knew. If you want to see another story hidden inside an old photograph, a story that took 100 years to surface, watch this next. And thank you for remembering Alina.